Imagine a world where supernatural horrors are contained by a shadowy organization. A world where a concrete statue ends you if you blink, where a plague doctor's touch transforms you into something inhuman, where an endless IKEA traps shoppers for eternity. This isn't just fiction, it's the SCP Foundation, one of the internet's most elaborate collaborative nightmares, and its origins are stranger than you might think. Welcome to Vanishing Threads. Today we're exploring how a single creepypasta evolved into one of the internet's most elaborate collaborative fiction projects, the SCP Foundation. In the dark corners of the internet, there exists a vast database documenting thousands of anomalous objects, entities, and phenomena. Each entry meticulously details containment procedures, descriptions, and often disturbing incident reports. What began as a simple horror story on an image board has grown into a sprawling universe with its own mythology, rules, and dedicated community of contributors. But how did this fictional organization become such a cultural phenomenon? Let's unravel this thread. To understand the SCP Foundation, we need to travel back to 2007 to the /X paranormal board on 4chan. This was the internet's Wild West era, a time before mainstream social media dominated online discourse, when anonymous image boards were cultural incubators for what would eventually become internet folklore. In this environment, an anonymous user posted a short story about a statue designated SCP-173. The story was presented as an internal document from a fictional organization tasked with containing anomalous entities. The format was clinical and detached, a stark contrast to the typical creepypasta style of the time. SCP-173 was described as a concrete statue that could move at incredible speeds when not being observed. The containment procedures were specific. The chamber must be cleaned by no fewer than 3 personnel, and direct eye contact must be maintained at all times. The clinical tone, combined with the terrifying concept of a creature that could only move when you weren't looking, struck a chord with readers. What made this post different from countless other creepypastas was its presentation as an authentic document from an organization that matter-of-factly dealt with supernatural horrors. It wasn't trying to convince you that the monster was real. It was presenting a world where such entities were simply part of reality, catalogued and contained by professionals. The community's response to SCP-173 was immediate and enthusiastic. Other 4chan users began creating their own SCP entries, mimicking the clinical tone and format of the original. These early SCPs ranged from simple monsters to complex reality-bending phenomena. By mid-2008, the collection of SCP entries had grown too large for the ephemeral nature of 4chan. A dedicated Edit This Wiki was created to preserve and organize these creations. This marked the first step in transforming a one-off creepypasta into a structured collaborative project. The wiki lasted until 2010, when the growing community migrated to Wikidot, establishing what we now know as the SCP Foundation website. This move coincided with a significant evolution in the project's scope and quality. From 2010 to 2012, the SCP Foundation underwent rapid expansion. The number of articles grew from a few dozen to several hundred. More importantly, the community began developing rigorous quality standards. New submissions were subjected to peer review, with poorly written or derivative entries quickly removed. This period saw the introduction of several iconic SCPs that would define the project. SCP-682, an indestructible, adaptive reptile that harbors an intense hatred for all life. SCP-049, the Plague Doctor, a medieval physician who transforms people into zombie-like entities. SCP-087, an endless staircase containing an entity that can never be fully seen. SCP-106, the Old Man, a decaying humanoid that can pass through solid matter and traps victims in a pocket dimension. The community also began developing the Foundation itself as an entity with its own internal politics, specialized task forces, and competing factions. Personnel like Dr. Bright, Dr. Clef, and Dr. Gears became recurring characters with distinct personalities. By 2013, the SCP Foundation had evolved beyond simple monster descriptions. Writers began exploring more complex narratives through the following: tales, Short stories set in the SCP universe. Canons. Shared continuities exploring different interpretations of the Foundation. Groups of interest. Other organizations in the SCP universe, like the Chaos Insurgency, the Church of the Broken God, and Marshall, Carter, and Dark. The project's scope expanded to include philosophical questions about ethics, the nature of reality, and the human condition. Some entries abandon the horror genre entirely, focusing instead on wonder, tragedy, or even humor. Today, the SCP Foundation hosts over 6,000 main articles across multiple languages. The project has inspired video games like SCP Containment Breach and SCP Secret Laboratory, countless YouTuber videos, artwork, and even commercial adaptations. The community has weathered several challenges, including copyright controversies and internal disputes over the direction of the project. In 2018, the Russian branch of the Wiki faced a trademark claim from a Russian individual attempting to monetize the SCP concept. The community rallied, raising funds for legal defense and ultimately protecting the project's Creative Commons license. What makes the SCP Foundation remarkable is not just its longevity, but how it has maintained quality and coherence despite being created by thousands of anonymous contributors. The project operates through a democratic process where the community votes on new entries and policy changes. The SCP Foundation's influence extends far beyond its own community. Elements of its mythology have seeped into mainstream culture. References appear in other works of fiction, and its format has been imitated by numerous other collaborative projects. The Foundation's approach to the supernatural, treating it as something that can be studied, contained, and documented, has influenced how modern horror stories approach their subject matter. The clinical tone creates a unique form of horror, the terror of bureaucracy confronting the unknowable. What explains the enduring appeal of the SCP Foundation? Several factors have contributed to its success. First, the format lowers the barrier to entry. The clinical tone is relatively easy to imitate, allowing writers of varying skill levels to contribute. At the same time, the rigid structure creates constraints that often foster creativity. Second, the collaborative nature creates a sense of community ownership. Unlike traditional fiction, the SCP Foundation belongs to everyone and no one. There are no official authors, no canonical interpretation, and no commercial interests driving its development. Third, the project taps into fundamental human fears while providing the comfort of containment. In a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable, there's something reassuring about the idea that even the most terrifying phenomena can be understood and controlled. Finally, the SCP Foundation represents a uniquely internet-native form of storytelling. It couldn't have existed before the digital age enabled mass collaboration across geographic boundaries. It's a living document of how the internet has transformed creative expression. Some critics argue that the project has become too self-referential, with new entries often building on established Foundation lore rather than introducing truly novel concepts. Others suggest that the quality control process has become too stringent, potentially stifling innovation. Despite these criticisms, the SCP Foundation continues to attract new contributors and readers. Its flexible mythology allows for constant reinvention, ensuring that the project remains relevant even as internet culture evolves. The journey from a single 4chan post to a sprawling creative universe demonstrates the unique power of internet collaboration. The SCP Foundation represents a new form of mythology, one created not by cultural tradition, passed down through generations, but by thousands of individuals consciously building upon each other's work. What began as a simple horror story has evolved into something much more complex. A shared universe that explores not just fear, but wonder, tragedy, humor, and the fundamental questions of human existence. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the SCP Foundation is that it continues to evolve. New articles are added daily, expanding and sometimes challenging the established mythology. Unlike traditional fiction, which remains static after publication, the Foundation is a living document, constantly growing, changing, and adapting to the interests of its community. The SCP Foundation stands as proof that the internet can be more than just a platform for sharing content. It can be a space for collaborative creation on an unprecedented scale. In the digital age, horror stories are no longer told around campfires, but built piece by piece in the collective imagination of online communities. If you're interested in exploring the SCP Foundation yourself, we've included links to the wiki and some recommended starting points in the description below. Be warned, once you start reading, you may find it difficult to stop. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on our latest explorations of the internet's darkest corners. Thanks for watching. Stay curious, stay safe, and hope to see you soon.